Oh, say can you see America's Symbols, Landmarks, and Inspiring Words by Sheila Keenan, read by Dodie Norris. The Statue of Liberty is the world's most famous symbol of freedom, opportunity, and hope. She has stood tall over New York City's harbor for more than 100 years. When she was young, she was a warm copper brown. Steamships chugged past her, bringing millions of immigrants to America, their new home. Now she's a pale green. The boats still come, but they are ferries bringing millions of visitors to her feet. The Statue of Liberty is an immigrant herself. She was made in France. The French people gave her to the United States to celebrate democracy. Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi, a French sculptor, designed the statue he called Liberty, Enlightening the World in 1870. Some people say the statue is modeled after his mother's face and his wife's body. The Statue of Liberty proudly holds a torch with a golden flame in her right hand. In her left hand, Liberty holds a tablet with July 4th, 1776, the date of the Declaration of Independence, carved on it in Roman numerals. She wears a crown with 7 spikes in honor of the 7 seas and the 7 continents. There's a broken chain under her feet, which stands for America's independence. Bartholdi's Liberty is enormous and hollow. The sculptor used a special method to create a copper skin that gives the statue its shape. More than 300 sheets of copper were hammered over the statue model. These metal sheets were only 3/32 of an inch thick, about as wide as a rubber band. They gave the Statue of Liberty its shape. But what's going to hold up its 62,000 pounds of copper skin? A skeleton, of course. Bartholdi contacted Alexandre Gustave Eiffel, a brilliant French engineer. He would later build the famous Eiffel Tower in Paris. Eiffel designed an iron skeleton of 4 tall iron beams with cross braces. Attached to that is a network of metal bars, thinner beams, and brackets, which connect to the statue's copper sections. This system keeps the statue's skin from collapsing under its own weight. It also keeps the statue flexible in case the weather gets too hot, too cold, or too windy. When it's really windy, the statue sways 3 inches. Eiffel's ironwork skeleton was built in Paris. It rose 984 feet high. There was a double spiral staircase in the middle. 162 stairs up, 162 stairs down. That's still how you get up to Liberty's crown, step by step. By 1884, the astonishing statue was finished. The Statue of Liberty loomed over Paris. At a ceremony on July 4th, 1884, Bartholdi and the French government officially gave the statue to the United States. Now it had to get there. The Statue of Liberty was carefully taken apart. Every copper piece and iron bar was labeled. The 350 pieces were packed in 214 crates and shipped to New York City. The ship docked in June 1885, but the crates stayed packed. There was nowhere to put the statue yet. The French expected the Americans to build a pedestal or base for the Statue of Liberty, but not enough Americans had given money to build this base. Joseph Pulitzer, an immigrant who had become a successful publisher, was outraged. Pulitzer wrote about the problem in his newspaper, The World. He also printed the name of anyone who gave money, even a penny, for the pedestal. Nickels, dimes, and dollars poured in. Even children gave. In 5 months, 121,000 people sent in $102,006.39. The pedestal builders went to work. By April 1886, they were finished. Then it took several more months to rebuild the statue on her pedestal. Finally, on October 28, 1886, the Statue of Liberty was unveiled. Bartholdi pulled off the French flag covering her face. Cannons roared, ship whistles tooted, crowds cheered. Lady Liberty was home at last. Mount Rushmore is the largest work of art in the world. The presidents from left to right, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. The giant sculpture of 4 American presidents was drilled, blasted, and carved into the solid granite face of a mountain ridge in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Each head is 60 feet high, and their creation is as amazing as the sculptor itself. In the 1920s, a South Dakota state historian and a senator thought a large outdoor sculpture would bring tourists to their state. They got in touch with artist Gutzon Borglum. Some people thought the whole monument idea was unnatural or silly. The Lakota Sioux were angry because the Black Hills are sacred to them. Not everyone agreed on what figures to carve or who would pay for the sculpture. Borglum was a difficult but determined artist. He fought to get his way. Work on Mount Rushmore began in 1927 and ended 14 years later. Congress paid most of the cost. Borglum made large models of the heads. Then he used an ancient Greek measuring method called pointing. The models were measured with a small pointing tool. The mountain was measured with an enormous pointing tool. An inch on the model became a foot in the same place on the mountain. Borglum's sculpture is high up Mount Rushmore. The workers had to climb 506 stairs, about 40 stories, just to get to work every morning. Work meant hanging in a harness off the side of the mountain while drilling with a jackhammer that weighed 75 pounds. 500,000 tons of rock were blasted away. Honeycombing brought out the details in the presidents' faces. Carvers drilled shallow holes close together, like a bee's honeycomb. Then they chipped off the rock in between these holes and bumped out any rough places with a special hammer. And that's how George Washington got a 20-foot nose, Thomas Jefferson an 18-foot mouth, Theodore Roosevelt a 20-foot mustache, and Abraham Lincoln 11-foot eyes. Would you like to live in a big White House with 132 rooms, 28 fireplaces, 35 bathrooms, 3 elevators, a tennis court, a swimming pool, a movie theater, and an 18-acre yard? If so, run for president. The White House is home and office of the President of the United States and his family. This grand building at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. is the most famous address in the United States. Every American president except George Washington has lived there. So have first ladies, first children, and first pets, from parrots to puppies to ponies. In 1791, our first president, George Washington, chose the site for a president's house. It was a hill overlooking the Potomac River. The next year, James Hoban, an Irish architect, won a contest to design the building. Hoban drew a classic 3-story mansion. It would be made out of wood and brick and covered by sandstone. Construction began in 1792. Our second president, John Adams, and his family moved into the president's house in 1800. The house was cold, the roof leaked, and the plaster walls were damp. The yard was full of construction rubbish. The president's house was not very presidential. During the War of 1812, the British Army burned down the White House. But first they ate the lovely dinner First Lady Dolly Madison had set out before she had to escape. The president's house was ruined. Its insides burned out. The roof was gone. Only the walls stood, and even they had cracked. But the house was still an important symbol to Americans, so James Hoban rebuilt it in 1815. The sandstone was sealed with whitewash, or paint, to protect it. The president's house was soon nicknamed the White House. It takes 570 gallons of paint to keep it white. President Theodore Roosevelt made the White House name official in 1902. By this time, the mansion felt crowded. Roosevelt had the West Wing added. The West Wing now houses the President's Oval Office, the Cabinet Room, and offices for the President's staff. Another Roosevelt, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had the East Wing added in 1942. It now has a theater and offices for the First Lady and her staff. President Harry S. Truman arrived at the White House in 1945. Every president before him had left his mark on the building. Walls, ceilings, and beams had been drilled through and added plumbing pipes, gas lines, and electric and telephone wires. Rooms had been painted, decorated, and sometimes moved. All of this began to weaken the wood and stone structure of the old house. Then a piano leg sank through a creaky old floor. President Truman had most of the White House stripped bare to the outer stone walls. It was rebuilt with steel and concrete. This is the White House that stands today, with its original 200-year-old outside walls. The White House has 6 floors of rooms. The president holds meetings, gives televised speeches, and signs bills in the Oval Office. He sits at a carved oak desk made in 1880 from an old British ship. The East Room is the largest room in the White House. It is used for ceremonies and concerts. A famous painting of George Washington hangs here. It is the only object that has always been in the White House. There's also a grand piano with carved golden American eagles on its legs. The East Room is lit by 3 chandeliers that each weigh 1,200 pounds. Expecting 140 people for dinner? They will all fit in the state dining room. The green, red, and blue rooms are used by the president or first lady to entertain official guests. The walls of the green room are covered in green silk cloth. One look at the vivid color of its walls and you'll see where the red room gets its name. The furniture and decorations of this room are based on French designs. The blue room is oval-shaped. It has sapphire blue satin drapes and fancy wooden furniture painted gold. The first family lives in private rooms on the 2nd floor of the White House.